Hello and welcome to another episode of The Truth, Honour and Integrity. And I can't promise you the show will be on the same levels as Tuesday. That was fairly epic in many ways. But it will be interesting nonetheless. I described it this morning as an esoteric treasure trove of enlightenment in tonight's show. And that's what we'll deliver. We do have a bit of intel and we'll have a bit of fun along the way. I used to say this piece regularly towards the end or at the end of shows. And perhaps it's time to say it again so it sticks. Given what we've had in 8A, B and C, perhaps this makes a bit more sense now. If you lead life in love and care, you will prevail. If you lead life in fear and anger, you will fail. Feel free to be the person you wish to be, not the person who conforms to what others want them to be. You are a multi-dimensional being operating simultaneously on many levels. You are not here to conform. You are not here to be stifled, and you are not here to be enslaved. You are not here to be abused or to compete with your friends, family, or neighbours either. You are here to be the best you can be and do so as the crown of creation. Now go out with the confidence of who and what you are and excel in yourself, and in doing so, inspire others. That is the key. We will cover some of 8C later on, along with a whole heap of other op-eds. There's far more op-eds tonight than there is news or sub-intel. There will be no Q&A. I answered a lot of the questions earlier. And, of course, this week, as the clowns continue to expose themselves, we've had another alt media clown exposed their own level of stupidity. Oh dear, it gets embarrassing. And Kent Dunn, you know, he doesn't tax his acting abilities of being a clown too much. Except now he doesn't have Drake to share the load of drivel he spits out each week. And he's now asking for funds to send to the Draco, and they will return your soul. Who writes these scripts? You know, but there is a man who doesn't understand the finer aspects of life. There is life in Kent, but not as we know it. You know, return our souls. Indeed. No, avoiding assholes like Kent Dunn is what we need. I heard he got dropped by the Asian woman who was allowing him to spin his yarn on. And if Muggsy has any dignity left from her channeling BS exploits, perhaps she will boot him as well. You know. The drivel, you know, it used to be a source of amusement, and it is in a way, but it's also embarrassing now, the levels it's getting to. Enjoy the Westgate, Mr. Dunn. On a week where Sasha Stone sends his followers to our page to plead his case. Not a surprise, I did warn it was coming. You know, Sasha is in trouble due to his own actions. The man with the fake name. You know, with unproven at this point, and I must stress that, allegations of pedophilia, proven cases of disrupting the legal process with ITNJ, and proven cases of using the control system to bully alt media speakers, proven death and verbal threats to other alt media speakers, and the man with the stage name is in trouble. One suspects he will go missing or quiet, like Neil Keenan did, as his partner in crime has a tendency to do that. And I suspect the Stone will be thrown under the steel bus. A week where the Vatican proved my From Russia with Love series is 100% correct. They, along with several other organisations, are all part of a satanic cult under the orders of the Black Sun. The Vatican installed Moloch in their grounds this past week, an entity who sacrificed humans, mainly children, represented by the owl in the Bohemian Grove, as the Egyptian word for owl is Molech, as in Moloch. And then we had another actor, stage actor, coming to the fore, a bit like Let's Eat Babies for Climate Change, where a young girl, looked about 14, 15 or 16, appears on stage to ask for people to embrace pedophilia and also pedophiles. Now, I can support the last part, as it requires those people be given help with their hook addiction. As for embracing pedophilia, that is a no-no. Just because they get off by abusing children, it's often overlooked. It's not just the sexual abuse, there's physical abuse that goes on as well. In some cases, torture, sadly. Does not mean that we have to support it. The damage it does to children is lifetime lasting. The solution to me, some may agree with it, some may not, and that's fine, is put them in a facility and give them access to the extensive archive of child porn that the DOD, Langley and the FBI have, where they can jack off all day and not be allowed near children. Subsequently, they can then get help within that facility. And I mean facility. Prisons are for those who acted out live on their addiction, for me. But we need to build a facility whilst in the prison grounds, but not part of the main facility. This will cut down on violence and vigilantism. Help people with their addictions by all means, but embracing that concept is a slippery slope to the dark, and it feeds the heavily Zionist-based porn industry. Pulling kids out to do climate change and eat babies and pedophilia is okay, it's desperation stuff. There was an abortion trial concluded on Wednesday in Texas, with the abortion industry arguing that they should be allowed to continue dismembering living second trimester unborn babies whilst their hearts are still beating. It beggars belief. And earlier this year, the abortion chains Whole Woman's Health and Planned Parenthood, along with other pro-abortion groups, challenged Senate Bill 8, which prohibits dismemberment abortions, a method typically used in the second trimester to kill nearly fully formed living unborn babies. It's a sick world. Where are we next? Hillary Clinton in the news this week, better known as Anne, as an android, has said she's come under enormous pressure to challenge US President Donald Trump in next year's White House elections and make a run for presidency. Make a run? That stupid troll. Can't even walk up and down stairs, never mind run for anything. Seriously, Hillary, please shut up and go in the background. Well, we did warn it would get ugly. And the reason being is too many have not dealt with their inner traumas. I'm pleased that many in our group have. and you can feel and sense the difference in those who have. The ones who haven't will continue to spiral down until they reach the bottom of their own pit. That is a long way up than if you dealt with it earlier. You know, I did my part in warning people back in May and June of 2015 of what was to come. We're now in that time, and it will get ugly. Quick sound check, because it sounds a bit hollow, this call. Anyone on MeWe? Sound okay? Right, and on we go. We're going to go into some news items now. US President Donald Trump has taunted former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg amid reports that he is ready to jump into the White House race. And speaking to reporters this week, Mr. Trump said of the billionaire businessman, there is nobody I would rather run against than little Michael. And Mr. Bloomberg is expected to file paperwork for the presidential primary in Alabama on Friday, but advisors say he has not yet made his final decision. Typical of a politician then. And the 77-year-old has said only in March this year that he would not run for president, and reportedly because of the perceived dominance of Democratic frontrunner Joe Biden. But he is understood to have recently voiced scepticism that any of the current Democratic field could actually beat Mr. Trump in an election a year from now. And Trump retorted on Friday that Mr. Bloomberg doesn't have the magic to make it to the White House. The UK's credit rating is being downgraded again, according to the ratings agencies Moody's, which says Brexit has caused paralysis in policy making. They don't discuss policies. We mentioned about this on our show several times. Since when did they ever discuss policies? Both politicians or the media. And then they'll throw up, you know, likes of Brexit or the Trump wall as causing a deflection, and we can't discuss what's really going on. No, you don't discuss it at any time. That's the problem. And it has changed the outlook on UK's current rating, which is a marker of how likely it is to pay back its debts. They're not likely to pay them back because the Bank of England still wants to play the old system, as we'll find out later. From stable to negative, it is said, and Moody also criticised the general election promises to raise spending with no clear plan. It's a bit like the cabal then, and how they're going to finance it. And the UK is currently rated AA2, the third highest grade, and credit rating agencies grade countries and institutions by their credit worthiness. It should be a lot lower. That in turn can affect the amount that it costs countries to borrow money. The world of finance. People are struggling with debt, and so they give them another loan with higher interest rates. That's how they work, you see. Stupid. So a country is struggling, so we're going to lend them now at higher interest rates, which makes them struggle even more. The world of economics, according to the clowns. And Moody's stripped Britain of its top AAA rating in 2013 before downgrading again in 2017. And all the major political parties have committed to ramping up borrowing as part of their general election campaigning. And they have said this is to take advantage of low interest rates. Moody's changing outlook suggests this could alter in the future, and according to Jane Sydenham from Rathbone Investment Management, said the vast spending plans announced this week make the UK look like a higher risk prospect from an international debt investor's point of view. All they have to do is step down from the old system. Bolivian President Evo Morales has resigned amid turmoil following his disputed re-election last month, and on Sunday international monitors called for the election result to be annulled, saying that they had found clear manipulations of the 20th of October poll. Now, Mr. Morales agreed with the findings, announced his intention to call fresh elections after overhauling the country's election body, but politicians and the army and police chiefs had urged him to quit. Now, some of his allies were attacked earlier this week and said their homes had been set alight, and in a televised address, Mr. Morales said he would resign as president and urged protesters to stop attacking the brothers and sisters and stop burning and attacking. Watch this area closely, as it will blow up. It will blow up. The King of Jordan has announced the end of a lease agreement that gave Israelis access to 2 border enclaves. Under the 1994 peace treaty, Israeli farmers could cultivate land in the Jordanian areas of Naharaim and Zophar, known as Bakura and Gamra in Arabic, and the lease governing them was for 25 years, which could have been extended. However, King Abdullah announced last year that he planned to end the lease in what was seen as a sign of worsening ties between Jordan and Israel. Now, at the time, Israeli Prime Minister Mr. Nutty Asshole has said that he'd still hoped to negotiate an extension to the arrangement, but on Sunday, as the lease expired, gates on the border were closed, and the AFP reported that Israelis were prevented from entering. One farmer, Eli Arazai, said his community had been growing crops there for 70 years and described the end of the lease as a punch in the face. Not as much as a punch in the face as the Palestinian people, or the Lebanese people, or the Syrian people, or all the other countries in that region have received, due to Israeli hostilities. Nothing to do with the people, as we have found out. A Chinese maker of the rabies vaccine has been fined this week 9.1 billion won, which is about $1.3 billion, in a quality scandal that set off a crackdown on the industry, and it has subsequently been declared bankrupt. Changchun Changseng Life Sciences Limited, which lost its production licenses last year, said in a statement that a court issued the ruling after concluding the company was insolvent and couldn't pay its debts. Now, revelations that authorities failed to act immediately after finding the company might have falsified production records led to an outcry amongst a public already upset over deaths and injuries due to fake or shoddy medicines, milk, toys and other products. Changsheng Life Sciences used expired materials, mixed different batches of products and failed to test them properly according to the regulators. Predictably, the company destroyed records to conceal its misconduct, they said, and the country's number 2 leader, Premier Li K. Kwang said the company violated a moral bottom line. And no injuries were reported, but authorities recalled the company's products from China and foreign markets. Rabies is endemic in parts of China. Probably issued by the same company. A bit like the World Horror Organization. They give people stuff that makes them ill, and then they give them vaccines that makes them more ill. That's how it works. Where are we next? Subintel. This is, we've covered this a couple of times before. It's cropped up again. And it needs to be addressed. Licenses that would allow American companies to resume selling parts and software to blacklisted Chinese tech giant Huawei will be forthcoming very shortly, according to the US Secretary of Commerce, Wilbur Ross. Now, Ross said that some 260 firms have filed requests for such licenses, promising that quite a few of them would be approved. Now, in May, as the trade war between Washington and Beijing escalated, Trump put Huawei on the Commerce Department's entity list, citing national security reasons. I'll have more about that later. And firms on the list are barred from working with US businesses if they don't have a special license from the government. Now, Huawei repeatedly denied accusations that its tech is used for spying by the Chinese authorities, pointing out that Washington never provided proof of those claims. You know, if this is the case, the government needs to tear up the National Security Act entirely. As with this and several other business ventures has proven, the National Security Act means absolutely jack. Huawei would have full access to our systems with this venture and spying on a massive scale, which is no different to being spied on by the CIA and NSA, I might add. So the government has to come clean here. We are either in a trade or cold war with China, or we're not. You can't say we're going to issue licenses and then say they're part of a problem of spying on us. You know, if they continue with the former, then Huawei and other foreign-controlled entities that involve communications here have to be removed. And we create our own network of independent communications, which is independent of any other nation. Otherwise, you're always going to be open to spying one way or another. You know, don't make the mistake thinking this is China. It's not China, it's the system. The Chinese dragon groups and the Rothschilds, the KGB, Mossad, CIA, NSA, all work together. They're not separate. And they all spy for each other. But you cannot talk of national security and then have cable or Wi-Fi owned by foreign groups. Internet is owned by foreign groups, and our military is owned by foreign groups, I might add. And then turn around and preach to the people about national security. It needs to be sorted out, Mr. Trump. It needs to be sorted out. Maybe there's something in Russia, I'm sure that was in this week, of how the Russians are going about it, and maybe we should copy it, because Not because it's Russia, but because it's the right idea. Sask Power has announced that they're removing all the smart meters that are installed in the province. I think this is Saskatchewan in Canada, I think. And the minister responsible for Sask Power, Bill Boyd, said the utility company will be taking out all 105,000 smart meters. Yeah, around Saskatchewan. And I think the concerns about safety are paramount here, he said. The concerns are significant enough, and any time families are at risk, actions have to be taken, and that's why we've directed Sask Power accordingly. Now, the removal of the smart meters over the next 6 to 9 months will cost around $15 million. That's probably an excuse to put the bill up. And we view it as a similar to a recall situation, and the people of Saskatchewan shouldn't be responsible for the costs of this, and we'll do everything we can to recover the costs. Boyd said he will also be reviewing why the new meters weren't properly studied or tested before they were installed in homes. Interesting comment, is it not? And he also said, I don't know whether there was enough testing done, or actually any testing done. But he said, we'll certainly be conducting, along with Sask Power, an internal review of the procurement procedures around this and around the safety concerns that people had. We want to determine when these were originally ordered, if there were safety concerns known at that point in time. So he said, we have a lot of questions we're going to be discussing with Sask Power about how this came about. Now, earlier this month, Sask Power temporarily suspended its installation of smart meters around the province after half a dozen caught fire. Smart meters, smartphones, smart cities, none are particularly smart, as in clever, on our part, if you ask me. Perhaps it's all in the words, because the word smart also means to burn as well. And we've been burnt far too often by their smart offerings. Yes, the crush stupidity. This is in Japan, and it's a sign again of the way think tanks and marketeer clowns are trying to change the culture of how we go about things in daily life. This is oppression of the highest order, telling people what they can and cannot wear. The latest one is wearing glasses at work in Japan, and apparently it's become quite an emotive topic following reports that some firms have told female employees to remove them. What if they can't see? And several news outlets said some companies had banned eyewear for female employees, for what is said for various reasons. Among them, some retail chains reportedly said glasses wearing shop assistants gave a cold impression. And that has sparked heated discussions on Japanese social media over dress practices and also women in the workplace. The Nippon TV network and Business Insider were among the outlets to report on the issue, which looked at how firms in different industries prohibit women from wearing glasses. And they included safety reasons for airline workers, or being unable to see makeup properly for women working in the beauty sector. Oh dear. Perhaps they need a new job. If these people who impose this, the best thing to do is the whole staff walk out and boycott the company. If they've got no staff, there is no company. But have you ever heard such marketing drivel in all your life? You know, marketing people are what happens when you educate, not teach people. They have zero understanding of life and are just obsessed with pieces of paper with numbers on them. And that's what you get. So-called think tanks of lunacy. Again, this is something we've been warning about, and I'm pleased to hear that people are paying attention and acting upon it. But a university professor in China is now suing a wildlife park for enforcing facial recognition in one of the first significant legal challenges to China's rapidly growing use of the technology. And it is an issue that has become a matter of heated debate in China. Now, the Professor Guo Bing says the Hangzhou Safari Park is violating consumer protection law by compulsory collecting visitors' individual characteristics. And after it suddenly made facial recognition registration a mandatory requirement for visitor entrance. This is like the Disney. They said it was because of the 9/11. Yeah, right. And the park has since compromised by offering visitors a choice between using the previous fingerprint system and the high-tech facial recognition, a bit like the TSA. You either get your tits fondled or they show pictures of them instead. That's how it works. And the park is one of many institutions to introduce facial recognition at its entrances, and China has been aggressively rolling out facial recognition in the past 5 years. Originally, it was said as means of boosting security, but now it means of bringing consumer convenience to people's lives, particularly in e-payments. There's those convenience again. Yes, it may be convenience, but you don't know what you're giving away. That's the problem. The hidden data. However, this professor questioned the necessity of it, and there have been bigger conversations about the extensive amount of data that is being kept on citizens. Now, Dr. Mimi Zhu, a Fangda Career Development Fellow in Chinese commercial law, says that the case is very likely to be dismissed if Professor Guo continues to pursue it. So in other words, they're threatening him. And she says that at present there is not a legally binding instrument that deals directly with his claim, which is that the park is making collection of his biometric data a condition of entry and therefore rendering his consent meaningless. Nice comments. Perhaps I should read that line out again. And this is what you were up against on these type of people. There is not a legally binding instrument that deals directly with his claim, which is that the park is making collection of his biometric data a condition of entry and therefore rendering his consent meaningless. What people don't know is those cameras are absolutely everywhere. It's not new either, and are far more prevalent than most realise. But it is nice to see some taking a stand. And here's, I probably should have followed this up with the story earlier. A bill obligating all devices in Russia to have local software pre-installed on them is being considered by the Russian Parliament. and if it becomes law, there are fears that Apple could leave the $3 billion market altogether. The legislation, which passed the first reading by MPs on Tuesday, stipulates that any smartphone, computer or smart TV sold in Russia must have Russian applications by default on it. Such software, it claims, is friendlier and more attractive for Russian users than Western counterparts. But experts warned earlier that Apple may be forced to abandon the Russian market if such legislation is adopted. And the US company's philosophy is to only install its own iOS operating system and apps on its devices, no matter the country where it came from or operates. And it says it won't be a problem for devices running on Android, though, as the platform was always friendly to software from other developers. Now, the proposed law also imposes hefty fines on sellers or manufacturers who fail to comply with it, and the government will have to define which devices and software will be covered by the bill, which the lawmakers say will protect interests of Russian internet companies and also help overcome foul play by large foreign IT corporations. That's something that the America and Mr. Trump should consider. But first we have to get rid of the criminality in the CIA, NSA and Palo Alto and that whole conglomerate of spying systems down in California. How we doing? Okay. Remember, I mentioned, it was probably a few months ago now, probably 3 or 4 months ago, and we've done seemingly billions of hours of shows since then. But we mentioned about giant takeovers becoming prevalent as the market was about to get squeezed again into a smaller few. And perhaps these next 2 items are a pointer towards that. The brewer Anheuser-Busch in InBev, Nevada, will buy the rest of Craft Brew Alliance that it does not own in a deal valuing the Portland-based brewing company at about $321 million, according to the 2 companies on Monday. And shares of the Craft Brew Alliance soared 123% after the bell. Now, the deal is a reversal in stance by the world's largest brewer, which actually owns 31% in Craft Brew and has said in August it would not buy the company out. Yeah, they lie. Global brewers are facing several challenges in large developing markets in Asia, Latin America and Africa, even as people consume less beer in Europe and also the United States. Then in comes KKR & Co. has formally approached drugstore giant Walgreens Boots Alliance about a deal to take the company private in what could be the biggest ever leveraged buyout. People familiar with the matter said, leveraged buyout. Now, the New York, no surprise, based private equity firm has been preparing a proposal to potentially buy out shareholders of Walgreens Boots. And it's unclear how feasible the transaction would be given the need for large amounts of financing, and Walgreens Boots and KKR could decide against pursuing the deal. You watch, it will go ahead. Now, Deerfield, Illinois-based Walgreens Boots has a market value of about $56 billion, but is also $16.8 billion in debt. At that size, a take private of the company would top the largest leveraged buyout in history, beating the 2007 sale of the utility TXU Corp, again to KKR, and TPG, which was worth about 45 billion including debt. They're decentralizing. Another no surprise, Occult has now gained access to a huge trove of US patient data without the need to notify those patients, thanks to a deal with a major health firm, and the scheme, dubbed Project Nightingale, sounds very CIA that to me, was agreed with Ascension, which runs 2,600 hospitals. Occult can access health records, names and addresses without telling the patients, which was first reported by the Wall Street News Journal this week. And the tech giant said this was standard practice. Really, not telling people that you've got all their data. Standard practice, that tells you everything about Occult. And among the data Occult reportedly had access to under the deal are lab results, diagnosis, records of hospitalization and dates of birth. Neither doctors nor patients need to be told that Occult can see this information. And the Wall Street Journal reports that data access began last year and was broadened over the summer. Now, in a blog, Occult said its work with Ascension would adhere to industry-wide regulations, really, such as the US Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996. Well, obviously that act doesn't work to protect the people, does it? Only snake oil salesmen like Occult. To be clear, patient data cannot and will not be combined with any Occult consumer data, according to the firm. Well, why did he have it then? These people just think we're all stupid. Ascension said the deal would help it to optimize patient care and would include the development of artificial intelligence tools to support doctors. No, it's not to support doctors. It's to support their Libre system, decentralization, everyone's data going into the AI, and an all technological world that we covered in Clowns in Panic show. If you don't believe me, go and watch the series Continuum. It shows you what they're going to do. And the company also said it would begin using Occult's cloud data storage service and business applications known as G Suite. Very Freemasonic, that. Last piece before we get into the Intel and a music break. There was allegedly, that's all I can say, I wasn't there, so I can't prove whether it did or it didn't happen. But there allegedly was a shooting in another school today. An all too familiar occurrence when the news narrative is turned away from their agency-fed bullshit. It happens too often now. People are seeing the pattern. But perhaps they are using word magic again, particularly with the name of the school. You know, this is how these people think and work with secret codes and numerology and coding. The school is called Saugus, S-A-U-G-U-S. S-A-U-G means to choke. So the school is called To Choke or Strangle Us. That may or may not be relevant. Time will tell. Intel. Clowns continue to play their failed games again. It boggles the mind. This time, Moscow University take a bow. USC in California take a bow. Another university. So it's two universities they're using in an attempt to hack on the KIMS system. As per usual, it failed. Well, ain't it funny that the powers that be, or were, I've said that Kim's not the trustee, Kim talks shit, or Kim's irrelevant, and yet they all want to access her system or add her to the failed systems that they have, or try to loot the trust that they spent so long trying to dismiss it. Funny that, isn't it? Anyway, here's an update of what is going on with the KIMS system, which means Key Integrated Monetary System. Phase 1 has been implemented, and it is the Financial Key Integrated Monetary System. KIMS 1 has been confirmed by the Federal Reserve, the Bank of England, not that they like it too much, but it has been confirmed, and also Russia this week. Phase 2 was launched on Sunday. Key Intelligence and Military Systems. This has become the operating system, or the only operating system for the world for all intelligence and military systems. So it's all ran out of the one system. GIA trumps everything else. But it does have monitoring for attempted false flags, intel, and true intel dating back to the 1940s. Under the Treaty of Versailles, also registered as an instrument that was sold to the trust to gain money for wars. Oops. And was used as a legal entitlement to create KIMS 2 this week. Technically that's phase 2 and 3. But I wonder what phase 4 and 5 will be. Media, judicial, legal systems, corporates. I guess we'll have to find that out next week. As for the attempted hackers, they received an indication of what happens when you attempt to hack KIM's system. I hope they like that response. I think they have a lot of work to fix it. So to the clowns who still like to play games and halt progress, that eventually you will not be able to halt, whether you like that idea or not. Here is a song from Kim. This was sent directly to the clowns in the universities in Russia and California who tried to hack. I hope you liked the response you got back. We'll be back shortly. You best stay out of her way. You wouldn't like it if she gets angry. Right, let's get into some quite a varied list of op-eds. And the first thing we're going to go and address a Long Island football coach who has been reprimanded after his team thrashed another high school team 61-13 in a game. Apparently, Plain Edge High School head coach Rob Shaver was suspended by the committee for one game after violating the local county lopsided scores policy. Oh my God. And under the rule, the coaches have to explain their winning margins to a committee if it exceeds more than 42 points. And the policy has been in place for 3 years and is intended to prevent poor sportsmanship. Now, Mr. Shaver is reportedly the first to be punished under this unusual rule. Rules, rules and more rules, and yet very little in the way of solution-based policies made by people who, I might add, who stack their own games so high in terms of disparity with regards to wealth, power and asset retention. Now imagine if they set the rules to limit their gains, the same as they limit these kids' games. How much better would this world be if those rules applied to the L-ites? Next piece, technology. I was going to go longer with this, but I run out of time. But the advancements of technology, which is beneficial to us all in many ways, but it has many drawbacks also. It makes us more lazy when we have a lot of technology of our own. And obviously a lot of it has been used against us as well. But it comes in various forms today, and it's all about the phone and computer mainly. And like I said, it has many beneficial aspects to it, and yet so many of the system uses it for dark purposes. Look at war, for example. It went from hand-to-hand combat to swords and archery to bombs and the cowardly act of dropping bombs from 30,000 feet. Yes, it is cowardly. To attack countries with no defence. Again, that's the path of the dark. Look at America, which is the latest body of land to be used for the purpose of war, like they used other bodies of land for the purpose of war. America's just the latest. Has America attacked Europe, Russia, or China, or even Iran? No. Think about that for a second. Because according to the world of politics and the portal people, and add in some alt-media narrative to it, those three places plus Iran are a big problem to America, the landmass, are they not? And yet they won't attack them. And where I'm going with this is the discrepancy of who is the problem and who is not a problem, and who gets attacked and who doesn't. Only countries like Iraq, Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, Honduras, Guatemala and many others, all because they had no big war defensive weapons. But what is often overlooked in America is we have another landmass that is causing this country no end of problems on a daily basis. That's constantly highlighted in the media. That is right on our own doorstep. A killing machine, child and sex trafficking, and slow death poisoning cult called Mexico. And if America is fighting for freedoms and defending this nation, why has it never attacked Mexico? In light of events in this past week or so, where 11 Americans were slaughtered by drug gangs, it is a question that Americans should be asking. What are we going to do about it? They're killing our people left, right and centre in California and all of the southern states. Yes, we know there is US involvement in it, particularly at Langley again. But it's something that we have to address. With regards to sex trafficking, the figures are high in America. But there's also some recent statistics out of Canada, whereby it's now classed as the fastest growing crime in the country. And the issues of sex trafficking in Canada in particular, where 93% of the victims of sex trafficking in Canada are Canadian born. 93%. Sadly, the average age of the person who is being sex trafficked is just 14. And it takes just 24 hours or less to fall victim to a sex trafficker. Less than 24 hours for the procurement of the child. And what the report says is Highway 401 is the main sex trafficking highway of victims out of and into Ontario. Now, according to psychologists, they say it takes 3 years to recover. Them and their book reading analysis is so far off reality, it's not even funny. The reality is most of them never recover. They just don't. Unless they have a support structure around them. A bit like what we have in THI. Quite a number of our members have overcome abuse patterns and addictions because of the support of the group. Attending a psychologist once a week who's only read a book of how to do psychology, which is not how you do psychology. It's just not, you got to have empathy for a start. It's not helping these people recover. There's quite a few of our members who have gone through this type of sexual abuse, including one I read out last week. And they've come through it because of the support structure. Sadly, there's not enough of it. But maybe that's something we can address with the People's Club in future. Well, this was a story from one of the members, and I'd mentioned about the Fae. The fairies, the Fae, in recent shows. And this particular person had an experience with the Fae and fate, which is where the word comes from. And I think it was a she. She said, up until my 20s, I thought there was something a bit special about me because I had an experience which I considered a kind of blessing with the Fae when I was about 5. It was only a few years back, in my late 40s, that I realised it had been a curse all along, and how it had directed my life in negative ways. All of it geared towards soul and energy harvesting, as well as possession, severe loneliness, isolation, lack of emotional stability, and subsequently low self-worth. And she said, I've been using frequencies and subliminals to help break these curses and rid myself of entities. But it's amazing how deep these go. They latch onto the nervous system itself in its quantum form, burrow into the marrow, intercept the subconscious and psychic messages. Sometimes it feels like I am the embodiment of the curse or curses itself. The feeling of being used then becomes the frequency of existence, attracting the reinforcement of that feeling. Not knowing how much of my spirit has been eaten, how much is left, whether it can be restored, and what will happen to me when I die are awful uncertainties that I experience on a daily basis. To the person who wrote that, when you die, you will be okay. So there's no worries on that front. That particular technology has been removed. My only comfort are my emotions, not the anger, but the tears, my empathy and compassion. It is when I experience these things that I can believe I still have a soul. Yes, you do. All communications with my soul itself is intercepted, as is my attempts to communicate with Source. Yes, that's the voice technology in the head. That's why we spoke recently about counteracting what are your thoughts and what are theirs. Learn to control it, and that communication is restored. I do grounding, and that was the plan of the dark forces, to cut all in here off from source via tech and manipulation, and the worst thing anyone can do when faced with these issues is play the victim card. Yes, it is all so easy to do, playing the victim. I did it myself when I was younger, but that not only feeds the beast, but returns you back to that timeline and subconsciously replays the event as live, not past. And in some cases that then becomes self-torture, and the victim wheel keeps spinning. She went on, when I communicate with Earth using heart and will, I do get the signs, the breeze, the animals, etc. that cannot be intercepted. So that's cool, and I'm very grateful for that. The Fae I experienced were not the little butterfly people, but they came as coloured beings, not bright, but a bit misty, in female form. Each one was a different colour, orange, green, yellow, blue, purple, etc. And there was an activation of my sexual energy, my first sexual experience, even though there was no sex. It was chakra based, and it was through this interference that my energy had been used for all those years to my own detriment, deciding my fate. I do feel that this changed some years ago, and that's when the war that I'm waging really began. This particular group of entities are on a par with the Pleiadians, that have largely been over-glamorized on the alt media as something benevolent, when clearly this is not the case, particularly the Pleiadians. In my experience and knowledge, these beings are, particularly their darker elements, on a par with the jinns. Like always, there used to be good and bad, but these entities fell a long time back. Why? Because they dabbled in the magic, is why. The seducement was set, and they bought it. Now, for some insight into comparisons between the jinns and the Fae, read the Solomon texts. There is a 40-page version online rather than the 300+ one. And then watch Lost Girl on Netflix. The series is not that good, to be honest, and a bit over-sexual in content, which is indicative. as that is related to the Fae. But it tells you quite a lot about the hidden world and also who fell and why. And they all had, like the demons that Solomon brought in, they all had individual tasks of how they interfered or interacted with humans. Some used as food, including the Fae. Some used to interfere and play games. Some disrupted marriages. Some disrupted finance. It's the same. And the Fae, like the elves, fell. The elves in particular went dark. The epitome of them, the elves, is Batman. He is the Dark Elf. They told you that, the Dark Knight, who resides in Gotham and is symbolized in the sky by one beam of light. Now, which city has a single beam of light and is referenced as Gotham? Yes, New York again. With man worshipping Haton, as in Manhattan, Haton, which is at-on, and also an anagram of NATO. It's all there in your face once you connect the dots. The UPS Workers' Brigade are out in force again, judging by this particular article. And once, if you wanted to assess how well someone might do climbing the career ladder, like that's the pinnacle of everything, not, you might have considered asking them to take an IQ test. And for years it was thought that was the intelligence quotient test, which measures memory, analytical thinking and mathematical ability, and was one of the best ways to predict our future job prospects. But more recently there has been an increased attention on emotional intelligence, EQ, broadly characterized as a set of interpersonal self-regulation and communication skills. Now, EQ is now widely seen as a toolkit that plays an important role in helping us succeed in multiple aspects of life, according to the report. Both IQ and EQ are considered important to our career success, but today, as technology redefines how we work, the skills we need to thrive in the job market are evolving too. Enter adaptability quotient, or AQ now, a subjective set of qualities loosely defined as the ability to pivot and flourish in an environment of fast and frequent change. Dear me. IQ is the minimum you need to get a job, but AQ is how you will be successful over time, according to Natalie Fratto, a New York-based vice president at Goldman Sachs, who became interested in AQ when she was investing in tech startups. So she was a vulture capitalist then. And she was subsequently presented a popular TED talk on the subject. This is the same TED talk that brought that child telling you to embrace pedophilia, I might add. Tells you about the levels of people that go on there. And Fratto says AQ is not just the capacity to absorb new information, but the ability to work out what is relevant, to unlearn obsolete knowledge, overcome challenges, and to make a conscious effort to change. And they say AQ involves flexibility, curiosity, courage, resilience, and problem-solving skills too, as society changes. Could AQ be more crucial to career success than IQ, it says? And if so, how do you identify it? And there is a way to hone AQ to future-proof your career. And if you think they're doing this to find out or encourage those skills, flexibility, curiosity, critical thinking, problem solving, oh dear, you are mistaken. This is more profiling for the AI database. IQ, EQ, AQ, AI. You know, since when have these people been interested about employing people with critical thinking skills? Like never. IQ, EQ, and now AQ. When they want bots who just copy and repeat, do they not? I would suggest a new category, FQ, as in fuck you. Hope you all sang along. FQ. The next portion of the show comes out of several documents that I've been reviewing and hadn't had time to go over, and I've pulled a few pieces out here and there that will explain an awful lot of things before we go into the next music break, and then we are going to go in more deeply into Russia with Love 8. But this first one will be of interest to Puerto Ricans in particular, of what has been going on there and why, and I've just pulled a small section of it out of a much larger document. But years before Henry Kissinger and Brent Scowcroft made population reduction the official foreign policy of the United States government, the Rockefeller brothers, most especially John D. Rockefeller III, as he, or JDR3, as he was affectionately known, or unaffectionately known, were busy experimenting on human guinea pigs. You're going to hear a lot more of this. You're going to hear a lot more about the children, and you're going to hear a lot more about these types of stories. In the 1950s, Brother Nelson Rockefeller was occupied with exploiting the cheap, non-union labour of Puerto Ricans in New York, no surprise, and the garment centre sweatshops, and they were flying them into New York at cheap rates on the family's Eastern Airlines shuttle. And he was also engaged in setting up cheap labour manufacturing directly on the island, far away from prying US health and industrial safety regulators, under a government programme called Operation Bootstrap. I presume that island is Long Island, home of MK Ultra and Montauk, etc., and all kinds of other fun and games, including plasma weapons that came down from higher D's that was messing with our heads for a time until that was dealt with. And at the time, Nelson was the Undersecretary of the Department of Health, Education and Welfare, and also a shadowy and highly influential figure in the Eisenhower administration. And in Nelson's version of Operation Bootstrap, the boots were owned by the Rockefeller family, they who funded Planned Parenthood, remember, and also their business friends. And the only straps were those used by sweatshop owners on the island to force a higher level of productivity. In other words, they were whipping the Puerto Ricans. While Nelson was thus busy encouraging the spirit of free enterprise amongst Puerto Ricans, his brother John D. III was running human experiments in mass sterilization on the poorest citizens of Puerto Rico. Now, Puerto Rico was an unfortunate island whose sovereignty got lost somewhere in the shuffle of American diplomacy. It was a de facto US colony, with ultimate legal control decided in Washington, making it an ideal experiment station, it was said. And through this newly founded Population Council, JDR III first ran some of the experiments in population reduction, which would later become global State Department policy under Henry Kissinger's MSS, being a prevalent word, letters, M200. JDR III made Puerto Rico into a huge laboratory to test his ideas on mass population control beginning in the 1950s, and by 1965 an estimated 35% of Puerto Rico's women of childbearing age had been permanently sterilized. 35% of Puerto Rico women of childbearing age had been permanently sterilized, according to the study made that year on the island's public health department. The Rockefeller Population Control and the US Government Department of Health and Education and Welfare, where Brother Nelson was the Undersecretary, packaged the sterilization campaign, and they used the spurious argument that it would protect women's health and stabilize incomes if there were fewer mouths to feed. There would be plenty more mouths to feed if they got rid of these psychopaths and the wealth that they've stolen off the people. And the poor Puerto Rican peasant women were encouraged to give birth in sanitary new US-built hospitals, where doctors were under orders to sterilize the mothers after 2 children by tying their tubes, usually without the mothers being aware of what had been done. By 1965, Puerto Rico was a world leader in at least one category. It had the highest percentage of sterilized women in the world. India lagged badly in comparison with a mere 3%. It made a difference when the Rockefeller family could control the process directly without government meddling. No oversight, you see. We've spoken about this before. Next item. The CIA, who were involved in that, had problems in the immediate post-war World War II period, distinguishing between underground groups and above-ground armies. And Langley used Marshall Plan money, that's the trust, to support a guerrilla force in the Ukraine straight after World War II. That was called Project Nightingale. Now, where have we just heard that tonight? And it was originally established in 1941 by Nazi Germany's occupation forces, and working on their behalf, Nightingale and its terrorist arm, which was made up of ultra-nationalist Ukrainians as well as Nazi collaborators that murdered thousands of Jews, Russian people and Polish people. Next piece. It has been reported in a documentary that 200,000 citizens of India were driven to suicide after being bankrupted by a conspiracy plotted by Monsanto, in which they were conned into using copyright Monsanto seeds instead of natural seeds they had used successfully for thousands of years. You wonder why Monsanto declared bankruptcy. No liability. This next item from a released report is closer to home. And it's indicative of the lack of empathy, care or support that they have for people who allegedly risk their lives in support of freedom in their nation and just get cast aside. The veterans who survived Vietnam physically, they never survived mentally. And the ones that didn't get taken to Hotel California and survived in one piece, then took their honourable discharge papers and planned a happy future, or attempted to anyway. But what they didn't know, that has been released by documents I have seen this week, is that those discharge papers contained secret codes known as the SPN code. And the code was linked to a book of slurs describing them as apathetic and bedwetters, were two of the examples that were written on their discharge papers, which was then made available to many employers and left the unknowing veteran unemployable. Still want your sons and daughters to be soul dyers? It beggars belief and leaves many speechless. The gods and the elites' plans and experiments in their what has been aeons search for life, longevity and also immortality, some of which we covered in From Russia with Love 8, and there is further reference to that in this piece. And this was a discussion that went on of how they achieved certain things that would promote life longevity. It's not particularly pleasing to read out or hear, I might add. And they were talking between themselves and said you would buy eternal health and physical life, and that's exactly what the political elite bought. Millions of innocent people were sacrificed in medical experiments to unlock the secrets needed to prolong physical life indefinitely. Now, the original techniques involve consciousness transference from one physical body to another, clones, as described in ancient Tibetan yoga manuscripts. Oops. Told you they were all linked. And later, the science of time manipulation originated when scientists noticed temporal anomalies during nuclear tests. And this research eventually led to the full understanding of temporal science and technologies to simply turn back the clock, like the loop, and restore youth to the old. I may have more on that in further shows. Next piece, a bit more easier on the ears and on the empathy strings. The British, Irish, Scottish, Luxembourg, German, Italian, French, Dutch, Swedish and the head of the European Commission all have one thing in common. none have children. And I would suggest that this is a New World Order plot. Either they're all clones for a start, which wouldn't surprise me, or bots. And where the very few rules the whole lot. And what it signifies is an end to the hereditary program, where they had lots and lots of kids and kept going. What they're realizing now with technology, their AI and the cashless society and the data mining and profiling, they only need a few to run the system. So there's no need for the hereditary program. And perhaps now that I would ask, does decentralization make more sense now? There's something that came up. I think it was one of the members who posted this, if memory serves me correctly. Was the Cold War another example of the mirror word magic, whereby the US took on the SU? As the saying goes, there was lots of smoke, gins, and mirrors, illusion and magic. And perhaps that term has greater meaning now that you've listened to the From Russia with Love series. This final piece before a music break was taken from an agency-based document and bears some elements of truth. Remember, they had access to what is called the looking glass technology, the mirror again. And I don't think it was a coincidence that this came to my attention again now. But we have covered much of this in various shows previously, but this kind of emphasizes it in many ways. And it said this is the type of dissolution that was described in the book of Revelations in the statement, I saw a new heaven and a new earth, as the old heaven and earth had passed away. And it's stated that this is not some kind of makeover where the earth remains intact but just gets spruced up to look new. It is clear from the biblical text that it first ceases to exist and later returns to exist. The reference to heaven is a reference to the astral world, which is correct and is a trap. Because most people go to the astral world between physical lifetimes, they believe it is heaven, actual heaven. Of course, is in the spiritual planes which are not subject to dissolution. The astral is the trap. There are spiritual planes that we should be on, and that's not one of them. The article goes on, dissolution does not mean that the earth will explode, burn up or start cracking into pieces as proposed in the 2012 movie. Dissolution means exactly what the term implies. Matter is deconstructed and simply ceases to exist, which is not correct. It forms into something else. If you are living in the physical or astral universe at the time of dissolution, you will no longer have access to a physical or astral body because those levels of matter have been removed from the creation. However, you will have your soul, which is imperishable, as well as access to your mental and causal bodies. Now, our knowledge disagrees that the soul is imperishable, as some entities have been feeding off them in these particular realms. and it is my understanding that some are not retrievable. However, it is said in the document, anyone who is not spiritually mature to function at the higher density or vibratory level of at least the causal plane will essentially become unconscious or asleep, and will remain in that state until a new environment is created, new heaven, new earth, where they can again become conscious. These people, souls called the meek in the Bible, will inherit the new earth at the beginning of the next cycle. The alert souls will likely complete their development on the higher material planes and then leave the created worlds for their real home in the spiritual world. That is correct. So you could compare these events to a type of graduation. Those who passed move up and on, and those who didn't make the grade are held back to repeat it, the West Gate. The work being done by the Trust and the team is to ensure that process is not interfered with again, like many times previously. Quite a few of the other races did not want this creation to develop and go forward, mainly due to envy of our abilities. Now the feeling is this cannot be stopped this time. Those that came in to help this time came in better prepared and with better plans to ensure a different result from the previous failures. Now what started off as an all move on, as in everyone, descended into what then became a rescue and is now a salvage operation to ensure as many move on for the development of the species. And whilst in some ways it is sad that it's not the all, it is what it is. This was a tough school to progress from, and also a very harsh lesson to protect your own sovereignty. Not be tricked by lazy-mindedness, and to learn to never give away your own powers like we have ever again. It is important the most developed in here push forward like the pioneers in some respects. We were not meant to stay on this planet forever. It stunts growth that is required in the cosmos and the universe. Only the dark forces like the stunted growth, as then they can feed off it. Now some will feel sad at some things in this piece, and that is a common human trait, to focus on what we don't have or what we have lost, and not focus on what we have gained as a species. This was a monumental effort to salvage what we have over many thousands, if not millions of years, and it has been achieved against the odds on an unimaginable scale, the enormity of which will not be realised until you are out of here. We'll be back shortly. Hi all and welcome back. So we wrapped up From Russia with Love 8 with 8C on Tuesday night with what was the longest THI show ever recorded. I think my voice is paying for it a bit today. And yet again it was packed with anecdotal and dot connecting information that was connecting it all so fast it was looping rather rapidly. And like the hamster on the wheel that kept running, so did the wheel. But the question is, does the wheel cause the moving or just the hamster? And we have been that hamster running the wheel for millennia, not recognizing the fact that if you step off, the wheel or the loop stops. We just kept running faster and faster and hoping for the wheel to stop or the view to change. But it never. Because if you keep doing the same things, you will get the same view, the same actions, the same responses, and the same outcomes as before. This time, it was different. Outside the wheel, the dark forces just laughed at us. Yes, they gave us the wheel, but we jumped on it and ran it ourselves. And the core of every one of their programs that have been ran on us in deceit is we play and run their programs for them. People complain about police states. They don't need police states. They just ask the people to be busybodies, and they do it. Divide and conquer, the same. Hating on other peoples or countries, despite never even meeting the people or visiting the said country. You know, we allowed their banks to flourish because we gave them our money. We allowed their puppets to run our country, mainly into the ground, as we voted for them. And we allowed them to poison our children with vaccines and drugs, etc. Why? Because we didn't bother to investigate or question what was in them. We assumed. And some will say, but we didn't know, Thomas. Exactly, you didn't know because you never asked the questions. And I'll give you an example how and why. If a person comes up to you that you don't know, you and your children in the street, and says, can I inject your child or children with this vaccine? And I will give you a $25 shopping voucher at Walgreens. Would you accept it? And allow the strange person to inject your children? Well, the answer would be no. And yet you don't know who the Walgreen shop assistant is, and yet you still get flu shots. You also don't know your doctor or nurse giving the injections to you either. You don't know their background. You accept it. But how and why are they different to the strange person in the street offering vaccines? The answer is, they're not. But your programming tells you that teachers, doctors, health experts, psychologists, politicians and church people are all nice, knowledgeable and with your best interests in mind. Wrong thinking. Because that is based on assumptions again. And assumptions are not truth or facts. The example earlier of what they were doing to the Puerto Ricans, who took part in that? The doctors. No doubt with brown envelopes in the back pocket. And our story has shown over and over again those assumptions have been the ruination of us. Now, am I saying all those people in those positions are bad? No. Just ignorant. And in some cases, arrogant. Because they have done exactly what their clients have done and assumed that what they were taught was correct, when clearly we have all not been taught, but educated, which is training of animals. We have been educated just enough to operate their system, but not enough to understand it or the hidden meanings or intentions behind it. Big difference. And people often say, how can we stop all this and turn around and say, I'm just one person doing this? Which is limitation speak when you analyse it. Why are we talking that way? In limitation. Let's look at it in terms of a virus. One cell, which is interesting that they call all matter in the body that makes up our bodies as cells. Cells are also prisons. But that one cell mutates into 2, and then 4, and then 8, and so on. Are you saying that you are a devolutionary cell and not capable of doubling your cell? If everyone wakes up one person, who then goes on to wake up another person, have you not issued a virus of good into the community? And what do they call it when it reaches a certain point? And then the 40 to 60% of people who are designated as followers of patterns, it goes viral, which is a derivative of virus. So our own type of virus becomes the antidote, does it not? The alt media itself is a virus to the system, not just the portal people. Why? Because it's siphoning their energy away. This is what this whole movement is about, siphoning the energy they stole off us via banks, religions, governments, spiritual groups, fake gods, ETs, and portal people. And this is the essence of the trust. It's not about pieces of paper with numbers on. It's all about returning life force energy they have stolen off us. And if you think of it in terms of the money, then you're not as awake as you thought you were. And clearly require cutting loose more of the old system and the programming you have allowed to consume your thinking and vessel. Now it only takes 10 to 12% for anything to go viral. And people have said, well, I'm just one person. That if I left that organisation, that wouldn't make a difference. But you are forgetting, you'll have made friends in that organisation. Now those friends have doubts. And people will follow. People will walk away from things quicker than when they joined if they feel they're becoming a minority. That's how it works. So how did we get into this mess? Mainly through laziness. Not willing to learn, only to copy and repeat and just follow the leader. Except the leader was corrupt on all levels. And people will say, but we were duped. And I agree. But the stronger ones see through the illusion. That was the key to the last piece before the music break. The stronger ones will see through the illusion. And the key is making everyone stronger, not weaker. Where we elevate each other, not drag each other down. Which has been the common practice. Often via the competitive and comparative mindset. And the key is to chart your own path, and yet so many just copy their parents. And that in and of itself becomes a hidden copy and repeat program, passed on from generation to generation. It's not charting a new path, it's just repeating the old. The old didn't work. The new will. But over aeons, humanity has become inherently lazy, particularly mind-wise. And some can argue all they like against that statement, but it is true. We have so many skill sets and abilities, and yet so many people will not use them. They all remain latent and hidden inside of you. And yet so many stay inside because so many seek the external gratifications. That's the illusion. You can wait for NASA to build rockets and spacecraft to travel to the stars, or you can work on yourself and go yourself. Which is more beneficial? Now, many can't do it as a collective, as we are too immature and lazy, waiting for things to come to them rather than they going to it. And people will often say, well, or, well, it doesn't matter. But then you learn that matter is a beam of light. So are you saying we should ignore the light? Everything matters. Because as From Russia with Love has shown, everything in their world is all interconnected and was locked tight so much that the majority of the people were oblivious to it. So that clearly to the dark, everything matters. And we must replicate that in a light way. Now the key to spirituality is to go within. And you don't need fake shamans, lamas or priests to do so. They have been taught rubbish on a bigger scale than we have. Perhaps the word consciousness will make things clearer. Perhaps this is a light bulb moment coming up. There are lots of new age and alt media bandying that word around, consciousness. But I suspect only a few really understand it or the concept. The original version of the word of consciousness arose in the 1630s, which means internal knowledge. Oops. Meaning state of being aware of what passes in one's own mind. From the 1670s, meaning a state of being aware of anything from the 1746. Now, whilst many will equate it to be or being aware, I will ask, aware of what? Aware that politicians are corrupt, churches are fake, banks rape us? Yes, all examples of being aware, or awake as we say. But they are all external awarenesses, are they not? Consciousness is internal knowledge, not external. Consciousness is about you. Now do you understand what I've been telling you all along? THI is about you gaining your internal knowledge. The external knowledge is largely for awareness of your surroundings and to subsequently protect your inner knowledge and being via consciousness. Hello, McFly. Essentially, you've been on a knowledge-consuming exercise. Perhaps the term I use in the shows called sin-eating makes more sense and now has a deeper meaning or trigger to it. Knowledge or sin-eating, you have to consume it and then process it, with the goal then to convert it or transmute it to gain energy, power from it. Then when it's all filtered, you poop out what is not needed. Sin means knowledge, not evil. And we've been sin-eating quite a lot with this show. Let's look at some of the details of the show. And some will argue it's only a few lamas or priests that are doing this stuff. And you can't just dismiss things because of a few bad apples. Well, if that's your thinking, you're missing the point. It's not the individuals I'm referring to, it's the program. Who operates it becomes irrelevant. It's the same as government. Parties and presidents change, but it all remains the same. Why? Because it's the same program. And yet so many of us follow it. But there's also a reason why they say following it blindly. Because you don't see what is going on. And it is a spell cast. Follow it blindly. It's a spell cast. To make those with eyes to not see. But once you see, quote unquote, their whole illusion program falls apart. That's the difference. Another thing we referenced in an earlier From Russia with Love show was the Gardens of Eden. Not one, but 4. The original one was in India. And then we heard of the story whereby Cain was cast out of the Garden of Eden for murdering his brother and sent to the land of Nod to the east. So I looked what was east of that region. And lo and behold, you find Tibet. Coincidence? Also in the last show, you mentioned that Mary got pregnant by the Holy Ghost, they say. So if Jesus was the Son of God, that means God is a ghost, does it not? They then tell you it is the Father, the Son and the Holy Ghost. Nobody asked what happened to the mother. Immaculate Conception again. Dearie me. But the word ghost as a word did not come into the language until the 15th century. So how can the church base this on something that was alleged to have happened 2019 years ago? Like the letter J never existed until the same time period as the word ghost. It makes no sense. The term ghastly derives from the term ghostly, and no, it's not a coincidence. But let's look deeper into the word ghost, shall we, given it's a relatively new term in comparison to the timeline of the Bible. Another word for ghost was ghoul, meaning an evil spirit who seizes things and who fed on the dead until they were taught how to feed on the living. We're talking about jinns here. And it was also referenced as a demon. So you have G for ghoul and then host. The ghoul host. Whether that G is indicative of the Freemasonry symbol remains to be seen, but it would not surprise me if it's actually referenced in just that. And the ghost in Christian references is clearly undefined, but it has to be male if it got Mary pregnant, or maybe not, because in their world they just make shit up as they go along, and critical thinking on the matter destroys their illusion. The information makes no sense unless you are comatose, but it's not your toes in a coma, it's your brain and thinking pattern. If sense is common, why is it rare when it comes to these programs? All of it is fake Jewish Hebrewism, ruining everything that was sacred here, backed by their Anunnaki counterparts, and yes, they are linked, and one and the same. They went about distorting our thoughts. Yes, that is where the term thoughts came from. Thoth. And much of life as we knew it is and was fake. The masks worked well, but no more they don't. It's collapsing around them. Thoth is another one like Solomon, supposed to have been helping here, and fell for the dark seducement. Another of the Pleiadian Nibiru crew who wreaked havoc here. And his group of avians, not the fake blue chicken variety, are one of the 5 groups of beings that made up the Anunnaki. As an added piece to 8a, and we discussed the missing zodiac of Fiacus, the constellations of the zodiac are generally associated with the months of the Hebrew calendar. Oops. Why? Because it's lunar based is why, and why the Jewish people follow Lilith, the Dark Mother, also known as the Kali Ma, which means Dark Mother. Now this is not to be taken as a denigration of Jewish people. Not. They've been used as pawns more than we have, and they, like the rest of the world, have to see the illusion and break through it. Now, some of the more religious sectors of the alt media are crying currently, saying the Cabal is ending the connection to the God. What they really mean is the God of the book. And yes, I agree, that is exactly the case, but not the way they think. Because the God of the book is not yours or my God. And so what they're doing, they are actually doing us a favour in a roundabout way. But there's always a hidden agenda. And what they're trying to do is creating a new God, which is them, with the power centre in Jerusalem. As one illusion falls, they create a new one. The word God needs to be universally replaced with source. And people told their source, not God, is within them. And it never was external. These are the things we can do without. Yes. The key to it all is people coming together. This is what they fear the most, that is lost on the Light Brigade. And as a reminder of their fear, when the people in the past started to come together and they were building a city and also a tower and became a community, this biblical chapter tells you what happened next. Genesis 11:6-8. And the Lord said, if they have begun to do this as one people, speaking the same language, then nothing they devise will be beyond them. Come, let us go down. Us, I thought the Lord was singular. Let us go down and confuse their language, so that they will not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them from there over the face of all the earth, and they stopped building the city. That's your Lord. Or this, the Lord will bring a nation from afar, from the ends of the earth, to swoop down upon you like an eagle, a nation whose language you will not understand. Now, most people will have misinterpreted that, which is understandable, but this is what this is saying. They will swoop with the phoenix. Not with a country, as people assume nation means. The reference to a nation being a country was not introduced until 1864. A nation means a race, tribe or species with a different language. There is your ET disclosure right there in that sentence. The Lord will bring a species from afar that swoops down on you like an eagle, and a species whose language you will not understand. A language you will not understand means it came from somewhere else, not Earth. That language was Latin. That rules law. And which religion is known as the religion of law? Judaism. Which I know is connected to the Draco and subsequently the Anunnaki. What this also tells you about this Lord that so many worship is, he was an evil, demonic and psychotic son of a bitch. Yes, you, Anu. And the one thing that will be overlooked in the Bible is the Lord. is always spelt in capital letters, which actually means the Lord is dead. And yet we are told they are immortal. Funny that. The scriptures, Bibles, and fake emerald tablets done by Thoth to distort real knowledge. But hidden within the bullshittery are gems of truth, once you grasp the understanding. Those books and scriptures were not about us and our story, but them and their story, them being the off-world entities. Then it all comes into view, as clear as day, as they say. But those books are said to be all holy, whatever that means, are riddled with wrath, vengeance, bloodletting, incest, sacrificing, bodily fluids and waste of all kinds for ceremonies. Deception, sorcery, magic, black magic, worshipping non-humans, binding, plagues, demons, beheadings, denigrating women, dark sexual magic, word magic, all done in a veiled, hidden cloak of deception and wrapped into programs that are said to be good for you. Like religion and spirituality, it is corrupted beyond repair. And it needs to be scrapped and the true story told. The Bible is their story, not ours. It has been a tough learning lesson that is littered with traps, spells and misunderstandings. But the key to it is intention. Intentions that you set, not the entity set. The entity set who laid out the path of doom for you. You have to learn to chart your own path, and only you are responsible for that. Man fell, it is said. No, we all fell into the pit of darkness. And only now some are seeing the shaft of light at the top of it and beginning to emerge out of it. It was an emergency, one word. Now it's 3 words: emerge and see. As 2020 comes into view, that vision will be much clearer. The climb out is and was muddy, filthy, brutal and strenuous, but ultimately worthwhile as the animus within us takes hold and goes forward. Animus means rational soul, mind, life, mental powers, consciousness, sensibility, courage and desire. We will require all of those qualities and more going forward. We are in the quickening period. The traps they set everywhere. They killed us in the sea after 7 years, but we were reborn and another trap was set. As we emerge out of the sea onto the land, they put us in quicksand, left our heads in the sand. The key is now establishing ourselves on the land, not the quicksand or the maritime traps. Maritime is Mari, and again a reference to the Dark Mother. Some will say, but Thomas, it's all a bit depressing hearing the alt media, religion and spiritual practices around the world are corrupted. And I do get that to a degree. But from my perspective, it's enlightening. Why? Because we are seeing through the illusion, through the fog, passed down to us from the mists of time. It is the true path to real enlightenment, which comes from within. Now the dark have far more work to do than we do, as they are more out of balance than we are, and they brought it on themselves also via the misuse of free will. And it's all about riding the waves as you bob forward, which is progression. This is not linear line actions, but vertical timeline events. On linear events, you are told to wait for things to happen. If you stand still on a linear path, you go backwards. In those terms, it can perhaps be deduced that the Weight Club was actually a spell cast and a warning to those not only in Cosmic Voice, but also the Q movement. Some will say it doesn't matter. Does it matter? Unaware they are more spellcasts. Matter is a beam of light, and all light matters. Some will say nothing is sacred anymore. Not on the external it isn't. But what is sacred is you. Yes, you, for the hard of hearing. How are you going to help prepare and develop you and protect that what is sacred is the key. It's an arduous process we face and faced, but we work with what we have. It is a challenge, maybe the biggest challenge you will ever face. But with attitudes of I'm possible instead of impossible, it's not insurmountable. As shown in the giant strides of progress we have already made. It requires fluidity, which is flexibility, and the fluidity is recognized by what is inside of you. Water. We are 70 to 80% water. And we can make our own oceans be angry and violent, or we can calm them like the rivers. Your water is streaming again inside you. Those illusions you absorbed were there for the purpose of creating dams inside of you. Dams restrict the flow of water. Water is the source of life, they say. And we are the only planet that has living water. Perhaps water is the source. And subsequently, you are the living embodiment of living water and the source spark within you. The fluid movement of water that is within you is a river stream of thought, love, and consciousness. Love, they say, it is a river. I say, let it flow. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Bye for now.